Hey guys, Back Photography here, back again with another video, and today we're going to be looking at a behind the scenes photo shoot that I did with Storm Brooks Hamilton, and I'll leave a link to her Instagram in the description if you're interested in checking out more of her work. We're going to be looking at a few different photos, a few different locations, and primarily the Sigma 35mm and Sigma 85mm lens. Now all of these photos were taken on a Sony a7R II camera, and we're going to have a look at the different locations that we shot at and at the two different lenses and how these two different lenses take vastly different photos because of their varying focal lengths. So if you like this sort of content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out any of the content in the future. Okay, so let's have a look at the first location. The first location we are in here is like a dingy sort of alleyway, and it turned out not to be a very good place at all to do photography because the lighting was very uneven and didn't flatter our model Storm very well, particularly her face. You can see that in the photo here that we're looking at, we have blotches of light on her face. Some of her jumper is overexposed, whereas other parts are a little bit underexposed, and the lighting here just wasn't really the sort of lighting that I wanted for this photo shoot, so we decided not to shoot here for very long and move on to the next place, because when you're shooting, particularly at the start of photo shoots, you might have to try a few different locations before you can find the lighting you're looking for, the backgrounds you're looking for, and that sort of thing. So don't be worried about shooting somewhere a little bit and then realizing maybe it's not the best place to shoot and just moving on somewhere else. That's totally fine. We tried shooting in this location at a few different angles to see if we could get the lighting to be a bit more flattering, but we couldn't find a good way to use this location that got really nice portraits, so we decided to move on to somewhere else. So here is one final photo from this location that I'd like to show you. You can see again the lighting is not that great. We have on the forehead of Storm a bit of overexposure, and as well on her nose, and then her face, her left cheek in particular, from her perspective, her left cheek is quite underexposed, and yeah, the lighting is just not very flattering, so it was time to move to a different location. So basically we moved out of the corridor and into a really open space, and because it was quite early in the morning and the place that we were in was in the city but not in like a really popular part of the city, we managed to find some benches and an open area where there wasn't really that many people walking around. And that meant that we had full reign to set up cameras, do plenty of shoots without anyone getting in the way in the background, without us disturbing anyone, that sort of thing. So there was plenty of space and plenty of different angles we could get, and also because it was an overcast day in the morning, there was plenty of good light from almost every single direction, which gave me the flexibility to shoot in exactly the direction I want, so that the background wasn't distracting and things like that. So we're going to have a look at a few photos at 35mm, and then we're going to have a look at a few photos at 85mm, and then we'll have a little discussion about the differences between 35 and 85mm, what I like with the 35 and what I like with the 85, and why they're both really awesome lenses, but they're really good at two separate things. So here we have one of the photos at 35mm, and I predominantly used a 35mm for this photo shoot because I thought that the background, all being the same color, was a good background that could be incorporated into the photo without being distracting. So we can see that Storm's jumper here is super yellow, and pretty much nothing else in the photo has much color at all. And I think that because the background doesn't have much color, it's mainly a gray sort of cream yellow color, it works really well with the entire image, so I'm not really trying to get rid of it by shooting at a long focal length. So shooting wide at 35mm means that I can capture the background a lot more, and you can get a nice feel of the scene and what's going on in the background. And because I'm shooting at f1.4 here, it's nice and blurry, so it's not too distracting. If I was shooting at something like f5.6, 6.3, 7.1, something like that, the background would be super sharp, and it would be a little bit more difficult to bring your subject forward into the scene without using something like flash, off-camera flash, to add depth to the image by making the foreground brighter or something like that. But because it's the same color, because I'm blurring it out, I think it works quite well here. I used a shutter speed of 1/320th of a second and an ISO of 100 so that I had crisp images. Because of the quick shutter speed, they're nice and sharp, and the ISO of 100 is the native ISO of Sony cameras, or at least the Sony a7R II, and that means that I get the least noise possible in my image because I'm shooting at the native voltage of my sensor. So the 35mm is a really good choice for portrait and fashion and editorial work, that sort of thing, because you can get a nice feel of the background of your image, you can get nice and close to your subject as well, so it feels more like you're there, and also it's just a nice focal length that's really versatile and you can use in a lot of situations. So now that we've seen the 35mm, we're going to put it next to an 85mm photo, and we're going to see a really big difference in how the image is composed and the compression between the foreground and the background, and a whole bunch bunch of other differences that we'll see between the 35mm and the 85mm. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the 85mm lens that we're using now on this photo, and you can see here that there's a lot less showing in the image despite the image size being actually the same. So the background is a lot more compressed, so we can't see as wide of a field of view of the background. Also, the background is way more blurry, and even though it was a lot more busy, you can see that there's a whole bunch of like blobs of cars in the background. It's way more blurred out and made way more creamy because of the compression of a longer focal length lens, and how in physics, basically the way that the light enters the lens determines how compressed it is because the focal length is different, so the amount of glass inside is different, and a whole bunch of other things like that. So the wider you are, the less compressed the background is going to be, and the longer you are, the more blurry the background is if you're using the same aperture on the lenses you're comparing. So because we're shooting at f1.4 on both of these lenses, the 35mm is going to be way less blurry than the 85mm, and the 85mm is going to compress the scene way more than the 35mm so that we can see less in the background. And an 85mm is a lens typically used for portrait photography. Then again, so is the 35mm, but the 85mm is the standard, and many people consider the 85mm to be the best lens for portraits because that compression can be very flattering to a model in the portrait. So what else can we see that's different about this photo, the 85mm, conversely to the 35mm that we just saw before? Well, as I said, it is way more blurry, it's going to be way more compressed as well, and also you're going to have to stand much further back to get everything in your scene if you're wanting to get everything captured the same way as you did with a wider lens. Another major difference between these lenses is that because the 35mm is a typical wide lens and the 85mm is a short telephoto lens, we're going to have quite a big difference in the thickness of our depth of field at any given aperture. And what I mean by that is because the 35mm is a wider lens, the depth of field at any given aperture is thicker because the wider your lens is, the thicker your depth of field is at any aperture. So because we're shooting at f1.4 and the 35mm is quite wide, we still get quite a lot of depth of field to play with where our images are going to be sharp. With the 85mm, we don't get quite as much forgiveness with the depth of field, so if we misfocus just a little bit, we're going to get quite blurry images, because at f1.4, 85mm only gives us a few millimeters of depth of field that will be super sharp. And that's one of the reasons people really like the 85mm as a portrait lens, because even if you can get someone's eyes super sharp, it still makes their skin a little bit blurry, which gives the effect that their skin is more clear because it's nice and smooth and a little bit blurry in the image. So now let's have a look at a few more photos we did in this location, and then we're going to move on to another location where we did a little bit more shooting before we wrapped up this photo shoot. And remember that all of the photos from this photo shoot are going to be in the description in RAW form, so if you'd like to edit along, feel free to do so. And thank you to everyone who has been editing these photos and sending them to me on Instagram. I really do enjoy having a look at them, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with these photos. So I was really liking the geometric shapes that we saw on this little garden pot plant feature thingy that we saw out the front of a big building. So we decided to get some photos here, and to use the 35mm again I think was the best choice for this area, because I could get really low down and get some interesting dynamic wide shots shooting upwards towards Storm, making her look like she's really high up in the sky and making it look like her legs are super long as well. Now Storm did a really good job here because it was really difficult for her to stay sat on the top of this feature here while also sort of bending down to look at the camera and still look elegant and as if it's super easy to do. And we were really lucky again that there wasn't too many distracting colors, and also this big window in the background was a nice background because it wasn't distracting, and it also just blurred away with the 35mm using a aperture of f1.4, making it nice and creamy and not distracting in the background. So we're going to go into Photoshop and we're going to edit one of the photos from this part of the photo shoot, but before that let's have a look at a couple of the photos that we took in this area and then jump into Photoshop and edit one from start to finish. Okay, so this is the photo I decided to edit. All of the links to the raw files are going to be on Dropbox in the description. So let's have a look at the first thing we're going to do. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into the colors, and we're just going to reduce all the colors that we don't want in this image, because I really want the yellow of the jumper that Storm is wearing to be the main focus of this image. So we don't need any magentas, we don't need purples. We need a little bit of blues just so it doesn't look like a black and white photo, but we're going to reduce that quite a lot. Don't need the aquas or the greens. We're going to keep the yellows, and the oranges and reds are going to be Storm's skin, so we need to keep those in as well. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some clarity to the image just to make the entire thing pop. We don't want to add too much or it starts looking like a cartoon, but we're just going to add about 20 points. Then we're going to play with the shadows and see where we like the shadows. I'm going to leave them boosted up a little bit, and then we're going to drop the blacks just so we don't make the whole image look washed out, and then we're going to add a little bit of contrast as well. So we can see here that Storm's skin is looking a little bit orange compared to the rest of the photo. So what we're going to do first of all is, you can see also this photo is a little bit out of focus, so feel free to roast me in the comments if you got this far in the video, and also notice that the eyes are not quite in focus, because in portraits we really want to get the eyes in focus because they are the focus of the image. Okay, so we're just going to add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of exposure to the eyes just to make them a little bit more noticeable, and this is just a very small change. We don't want to give them little laser beam eyes or anything like that, but even that small change, you can actually see a big difference when you zoom out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some clarity to Storm's hair, and that's basically just so we can accentuate the highlights and shadows, particularly up the top near the roots of her hair. And these are all very subtle changes that you might not actually be able to see when you're close up, but once we add all of them together, it will make a big difference to the entire photo. Okay, so that's everything for that. I'm not liking the color tone of Storm's face here. I think it's a little bit oranger than it should be. So I'm just going to get a paintbrush and just reduce it to about 5 points and add a little bit of exposure. And then maybe I'll drop the saturation as well just a little bit. And I think that is a lot better than it was before. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually make the yellow of that jacket even more crazy. We're going to boost it up about 50 points. We don't want to make it so that it's clipping anywhere, so we'll just zoom in and make sure that we're not getting any clipping yellows. And then we can really boost it up and see where it starts looking a bit silly. So maybe somewhere about here. Okay, that looks good. All right, so now let's jump into native Photoshop and finish off the image that we have here so far. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just a little bit of skin smoothing. So we're going to get the patch tool, which is just here, and then we're going to circle any areas we don't like and drag them over to an area that has a pattern that we do like. So we're not really looking at the exposure too much, we're just looking for a pattern which is smooth. So we're just moving all of these blemishes over to smooth patches of skin. And I'll speed this up as well, just so we're not here for 20 minutes watching me edit skin. Okay, so that's everything for skin smoothing. The next thing I'm going to do is just move Storm back in a little bit, just because I think that having a straightened back would look a little bit better for this photo. So we're just going to go and use the filter and then the liquify, and just get a small brush in this, maybe about 400, and just move that up a little bit. Just makes a subtle difference to make that back look a little bit more upright. Okay, so one final thing we're going to do is we're going to get the lasso tool and make a selection of Storm like this. And then I'm going to press Shift and also make a selection of this concrete, which is here as well. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with, actually I'm just going to get this little bit as well, because I just missed a little bit here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a select, and then I'm going to do an inverse selection. So select and then inverse, and now what I've done is selected everything aside from the stuff that I selected just before. And what I'm doing here is using the filter tool and then the blur, and just going to add a little bit of extra blur to the background, just so that Storm stands out a little bit more than she did before. So just adding 1 pixel at a time and then moving around the selection, just so I don't have any hard lines where I have blurred the image. Okay, so this is the final image. Quite minimal editing to this one. I really hope that you like it. Looking forward to seeing what all of you do as well with these photos. Please send them to me on Instagram. The link will be in the description. Looking forward to seeing all of those. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy this content. And if you're interested in getting any camera equipment, there's going to be a link in the description to all of the equipment I use on this photo shoot and all the other photo shoots that I do on this channel. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.